Is knowing something without knowing why. It is it's the journey from A to Z without stopping at all the letters on the way. It's coming to a conclusion quickly without necessarily taking the time at that moment to assess why you came to that conclusion. And you can think of it as like seeing the image before all the pieces of the puzzle are in place. You figure out what it is. And like every creature in nature, we are designed to protect ourselves from danger. And intuition is the primary resource that we use for protecting ourselves from danger. In fact, the root of the word, inter, it means to guard and to protect. And so most people don't make that connection between intuition and safety, but I'm hoping that today I can encourage that we all do that. In our case, when we look at ourselves relative to other animals, we didn't get the largest claws or the biggest fangs or the greatest muscles, but we did get the biggest brain. And that has allowed us to rise above all other animals in the food chain. There is nothing, not a single animal on Earth, that looks at human beings as its primary prey. There's no animal walking around a forest or a jungle saying, I just can't wait to get me a human. And the reasons are that we're very bony, but above all, we're very dangerous. We are dangerous to the animals that would consider us to be prey. And so we can kill a bee or a whale or any animal on Earth as a result of this big brain that we've got. And so the resource that we use most frequently in Western life, in Western cultures, is logic. I give you a logical reason why a thing is true. I don't just tell you it's my gut feeling, let's go with it. But the reality is that logic is plodding and unoriginal and far too slow to be useful in an emergency because it's slow to accept reality and it's burdened by judgment. And logic spends valuable time thinking about the way things ought to be or used to be or could be or might be. And in nature, an animal doesn't spend any time doing any of that. An animal threatened by another animal does not use logic. It uses intuition entirely. It responds either by intuition or by instinct.
Autistic people think in a way similar to how animals think. They have their primal instincts way more intact than neurotypical people.
What's the difference? Instinct is inbred. It is inherent in the animal. But intuition is a process that is constantly learning. So we learn throughout our lives and we gain new distinctions about something, and then that goes into our process. We slow down as we're driving by the car accident, and we look. Why? Because we're gaining a piece of information. Ah, that intersection is blind. Ah, those small cars are dangerous. Ah, those young people drink too much and drive. Whatever it is that you take away from that accident, you take it away for the purposes of your survival. It might be an injury that's caused by the greatest predator on Earth, which is human beings, the ones we fear the most. There is no perfect precaution for avoiding human predators or being safe from them. I want to tell you a fast story that's not in a book you would have read, involving a woman I interviewed named Kate, and she and her daughter used to go to movies with a group of other mothers every week, and they would go usually at dusk, so that by the time they came out of the theater it was dark, and they'd go in vans together or cars together or what have you. But on this particular movie, which was Jurassic Park, the mother took her daughter to see the film, and she parked far away from the theater because she had some shopping to do. She took stuff back to her car, and then she walked over to the theater. And in line at the theater, she was with all of her friends and with all of their daughters, and there was a man behind her who, for no reason that she could explain to you or me, made her uncomfortable. He was wearing a T-shirt, and the T-shirt said "Afraid of the Dark" on it. And he was wearing gym pants, and something about him gave her the creeps. And sure enough, as they were standing in line, he spoke to her, and he said, looking at all of the women and all of their daughters, he said, "Ladies' night out?" And she sort of said, "Uh-huh." She didn't want to engage with him. That's the end of the story in terms of everything that she had to react to involving that man. They then saw the movie about Jurassic Park, about ancient predators, and they came out of the movie, and one of the friends said to the mother, "Do you want to ride to your car?" And she said, "No, we're fine, we'll walk." And the moment she said that and saw the other mothers leave, she was upset. She realized she'd made a mistake, and she was thinking about that man. He wasn't even in the theater anymore, but that was on her mind as she and her daughter walked back the 2 blocks to her car. And so they walked down the street, and she could not shake the feeling of that guy in line. Now, we don't know today whether she saw him again out of the corner of her eye. We don't know what it is that pushed the intuitive button in her. But she began to walk faster and faster. And her daughter, who was 8 years old, said, "Is it a race?" And she said yes, and thought, "This will be a good idea, we'll run." And just as she began to run, she turned around, and sure enough, that man was following them. The man with the T-shirt that said "Afraid of the Dark." And she realized as they were running, they would not be able to outrun him. And she would have to get to the car and act very quickly. And she made the decision that she would get to the car, she would unlock the car on her daughter's side, put her daughter in, and then walk around to the other side. And she did all of that. She unlocked the car, and she walked around to the other side. But before she got into the car, the man was already upon her. And so she got herself into the seat of the car, and she just watched. And she said to me later, "I could see that my legs were kicking so much that he wouldn't be able to get hold of me." Basically, he had a position of disadvantage. And she said, "I thought to myself, car key, car key, car key." She said, "The next thing I realized, I kind of came back to consciousness in the car because the car door was slamming. And all the things that I told myself to do, start the car, drive away fast, I had done them." And she said, "When I thought about the car key, I thought, well, I could put this in his eye. I could stick him in the eye with this key, and that would settle this problem very quickly." And she said, "That is when I realized I had already done it." She had already stuck him in the eye with the car key. He was already sitting on the curb doing what men do when you stick them in the eye with a car key. And she had already driven away, and the car door had already slammed. All of these things had happened without her conscious participation. The only part that was conscious to her was the impulse that she got that said car key. And she said that she felt terrible and wouldn't want to blind somebody. And she said, "At least I didn't, I could have stuck him in both eyes. At least I didn't do that." Turns out she had stuck him in both eyes and didn't even know it. And the next thing she heard was her daughter saying, "Mom, you didn't put your seatbelt on." So her daughter was pretty much insulated from the drama of the experience. And she said to me later on that she said it was a terrible thing to do. I felt like it was natural that I was part of nature. And I said, "Well, sure, he did something very stupid. He attacked a woman who was with her young daughter. What do we all know about animals? You can agitate the bear a little bit, but you sure can't agitate the mother bear who's with her cubs." So he did basically a dumb thing and had the consequence for it. It didn't work well for him. And so whether she's right or wrong about whether he had a gun, whether she's right or wrong about any of her assessments that come now after the fact, all of the work was done by intuition in an instant. And that resource, what I really hope you're left with today is that resource is absolutely brilliant, and it's our nuclear defense system if we listen to it. And it has a competitor in our mind. There's intuition standing here to guard and protect, and there's denial standing over here. Denial is the one that says, "This isn't really happening to me," or "He's not really dangerous. I don't really have to worry about this problem." And the denial, there's a nice expression that says denial is not just a river in Africa. Right? Denial is a human resource that's enormously valuable to us for some things and enormously destructive to us for others. Example, you need denial to be willing to, sit on top of a rocket ship that's lit and is flying into outer space. You need to be willing to compartmentalize and somewhat deny the risks. You need denial to build a bridge across an enormous river, particularly if you were the first person to ever do that. There are places where it's a valuable resource in our lives. But I would say for 90% of our lives, it's a tremendously destructive resource. It's the thing that allows us to not see something we're looking right at. If intuition is getting from A to Z without stopping along the way, or intuition is knowing without knowing why, then denial is seeing the thing clearly and choosing not to see it.
The big differences are three. One is that the threat perception system is enhanced, so that people see danger where other people see manageable stuff. And this is not in the cognitive part of the brain, this is sort of the core perceptual part, the very primitive part of the brain. So the primitive part of the brain that basically is in charge of making sure that your body is okay, becomes a fear-driven brain. Number two is your filtering system that helps you to distinguish between what is relevant right now and what you can dismiss. Gets messed up. So things that other people may sort of ignore or not pay attention to, you start paying attention to it, which makes it very hard to focus on what's going on right now. The third one is that the self-sensing system, which runs through the midline structures of the brain, gets blunted. And that's probably a defensive response, because when you are in a state of terror, you feel it in your body.
Thousands of years of evolution have conditioned our bodies to protect themselves without us even realizing. In the majority of cases, we're thankful that our brains are looking out for us. But after all, we're just animals, and sometimes survival can become pretty scary. Eye contact. You may not realize it, but eye contact is an incredibly powerful force, and is connected with humanity's earliest survival patterns. As we evolved, children who could attract eye contact from adults had the best chance of being fed and cared for. Today, newborn babies will instinctively lock eye contact with their caregivers, which has had a powerful impact in the adult mind. A huge part of this has to do with the whites of our eyes. Compared to the other 220 non-human primates, we are the only species that has evolved a large white area of the eye. Chimpanzees can easily be staring at one thing while their head is pointed in the complete opposite direction, and we'd have no idea because we're attuned to follow their eye movement. For humans, eye contact was vital in our early development and gave us an almost instant understanding of each other's intentions without ever speaking a word. However, this fact can be easily manipulated by predators. In the wild, if you lock eye contact with a bear or a silverback gorilla, you're pretty much mincemeat. Direct eye contact is seen as a challenge to the rest of the animal kingdom, but it's almost instinctively done by humans.
Those who know someone with autism have probably noticed that they rarely look people in the eye. The co-author of a recent study on the behavior has said, contrary to what has been thought, the apparent lack of interpersonal interest among people with autism is not due to a lack of concern. Rather, our results show that this behavior is a way to decrease an unpleasant, excessive arousal stemming from overreaction in a particular part of the brain. The study authors noted that while avoiding eye contact is often regarded as a sign of social or personal indifference, many people with autism say eye contact causes them discomfort or stress.
So, the next time you're at a zoo, make sure to keep your head down and leave the staring contest for another time. Under cases of extreme stress, a response is triggered in the human body called fight or flight. It involves some pretty complicated hormonal shifts in the body, but the basic signs are an increase in heart rate, tunnel vision, dry mouth, and dilated pupils. The body needs to survive, and in most cases, remove itself from danger in whatever way it can. But when the body can't run, some pretty insane things can happen. Fear itself. A deer in the headlights. We all know the classic image of a woodland creature freezing when they see imminent danger. But there's actually quite a few crazy reasons why mammals have a freeze response. Some believe that it's a last-ditch effort after fight or flight has failed to try and be left alone. If they can remain as still as possible, maybe that bear won't see them, and maybe they won't be eaten. It's actually down to how your brain has been wired to survive through evolution. And a moment of pure fear is triggered by cells in the brain that are responsible for extinction memories. Basically, anytime you freeze in fear, you're remembering every time your ancestors thought they would be eaten by a lion, but somehow managed to overcome that fear and get the hell out of there. A mother's instinct is so strong that in some cases, they've pretty much developed superpowers to make sure that their tiny bundles of joy are kept safe. There's not really a lot of science behind it either. It's just somehow, sometimes, it happens. The bond between mother and child is something hardwired, an ancient instinct that has kept us alive for thousands of years. In 2014, Chelsea Camp was pet sitting for a friend when their dog went into a rage and attacked Chelsea's daughter. Well, Chelsea fought back with her fists and her teeth. At one point, Chelsea even bit the dog's damn ear off. Her daughter survived. A mother's instinct is something that you really don't want to cross.
We call this empathic attunement. These are further quotes. There's a kind of instant subconscious reaction to the emotional states of other people, but it's been there since childhood. If someone approaches me for a conversation and they are full of worry, fear, or anger, I find myself suddenly in the same state of emotion. And this means that sometimes social withdrawal is not necessarily due to social confusion or sensory sensitivity. The withdrawal is a protection mechanism from being with toxic others with emotionality.
Between Asperger's and sixth sense. I think it's really common with women. I know other women who have it. And I first became aware of it as being part of Asperger's from Rudy Simone's book. I'll redo what she says here. It's in the section on sensory overload. She has psychic sensitivity. I believe that in some cases our senses are heightened and are almost animal-like. We sense things. I think similar to our sense of humor, we miss the obvious and see what is not obvious to others. Very true. And then she says, I believe that this is a large part of why we have difficulty getting along with others. If someone is smiling and saying one thing, but psychically we are hearing something completely different, we will get confused and want to run away. This often conflicts with appearances and what others tell me, causing me to doubt my own intuition. I usually turn out to be right. A more cynical person might call it a self-fulfilling prophecy. The misperception of this sensitivity is that we are hard to get along with. Paranoid. And then she talks about how we end up staying home a lot.
To distinguish very subtle cues that others would not see, or it might be a feeling I pick up from them. What neurotypicals do is they tend to use the visual and auditory. The visual is the facial expression and gesture. The auditory is the tone of voice. Now, in autism, you have a different sensory profile. And I think this is in a sixth sense sensitivity. And is able to pick up emotions in other people using channels that neurotypicals aren't aware of.
That's when the whole image and his perceived threat from another person, but it was perceived threat. I think there are a lot of reasons why we get stuck. Using this simple example of the guy, socially it would be inappropriate. It would have caused him all kinds of problems. So he needed to suppress that anger, and you suppress it with the muscles. This is what Wilhelm Reich talked about, armoring. So you have this unacceptable feeling, so you armor against that feeling. In this case, it was in his jaw. And actually the way it came out, he had this image actually of biting this guy. I mean, how primal can you get? So, and other reasons are, again, socially unacceptable. And the other thing is we're afraid of the energy that's locked in our bracing responses and our freeze responses. And so the very sensations that will help take us out of the freeze response back into balance, into equilibrium, into inner regulation, those sensations are frightening often to a person. And so they stop those sensations from happening, but it's the very sensations that will take them out of the freeze.
Definitely accurate. Trust your intuition there. Can be overpowering. It's a sixth sense. So you avoid some social situations due to being sensitive to negative vibe.
There is no sincere communication with a narcissist. They're never communicating sincerely. They abuse language. They abuse truth. They're not talking to you with a point like a normal human being would. Whatever it is that they're talking about is a smokescreen for their intent. Talking is not really what they do. They signal. And what they're signaling is I'm better than you. What they're signaling is I'm superior to you and to everybody else. What they're signaling is you should fear losing me. So that's one thing to understand. And if somebody is communicating with you and they're not being sincere, then you shouldn't be sincere either. Abandon sincere communication when communicating with the insincere. Just let it go. It's not going to happen. You keep throwing your sincerity, your earnestness, your empathy into this sucking black hole, and it never ends. You'll never win. You'll never get to a point where you're like, yes, finally, I got my point across. I've been heard. No. Because here's the second point. And I got this from a counseling psychotherapist who specializes in narcissism, and his name is Gary Klein. And he says, when communicating with the narcissist or the borderlines, remember, the point is there is no point. The point is confusion. The point is chaos.